Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to our couch. We're so glad to see you again. Thank you for giving us some space over Easter weekend. We hope that you enjoyed your time with your families and you were able to have fun on Friday night. And we're so glad to have you back again. So we'll be meeting today, obviously tonight, and then again on Friday night at 7 o'clock. And then our final session together is Wednesday next week at 7. And then our course is done. And I just wanted to let you know that after this, some of the business guys in our community are going to be running a business course, how to get the most out of your business at this time. We are really moving into uncertain times, especially for businesses, and that's going to be really exciting. So stay tuned. If you would like more information, keep in touch. But I'm sure by Friday we'll have some solid information for you so that you can put that into your diaries. But there's Faiz. Nice to see you. Hello, Melissa. Good to have you all back. Welcome back. So, yeah, I think last week we were talking about communication and we were sharing notes from our friends Wally and Shirley Gertzmeyer. And this week, we are carrying on with their notes at the second part of communication, which is listening. So we've chatted about talking and how to actually speak and talk effectively. And now we're going to do the other half, which is listening. And I must say, I did say to Sean, I wonder if there are some people waiting for the second half of the talk, of the listening skills, so that they can get on with a really important discussion amongst themselves. So I'm sorry if we kept you waiting over the weekend, if you did have plans to have a serious communication time. But yeah, we're excited to share this with you.
Yeah, guys, we left this one for you now because like, ladies never listen to anything you have to say. So yeah, that's what tonight is about.
Not true. It's more men that can't listen than ladies. Ladies do like to talk, though, I will be honest. Yeah, so just to recap, what is communication, or what does it mean to communicate effectively? And we talked about how it involves transmitting information to somebody accurately enough so that they can understand it and then respond effectively. And that is our goal when we are talking to each other. We want to give out the information and receive the information so that we can have a great end result. And the end result is always connection. We want to bring ourselves together. We don't want to separate. We don't want conflict, which destroys the bond that we have as couples. So basically, we need to effectively tune into each other and be on the same radio length. I just wanted to read two scriptures about listening before we start. And the first one is James 1, verse 19 to 20. My dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. For man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. We all love that one. Quick to listen and slow to speak. And Ecclesiastes 3 verse 7 says there is a time to be silent and a time to talk. And that's the good news. We can be silent. There's times for us to be silent, and then there's also times for us to do the speaking. So tonight we're going to talk about the silence. What do we do? How do we be silent? And the key reason for listening is to understand your partner. And I think that's the biggest thing. Listening is not just about hearing words, but it's about understanding those words that are coming out to you. Listening effectively doesn't just include the ears that you are hearing the words with, but it also includes taking note of your partner's feelings, taking note of body language, facial expressions. It's the whole package of listening, not just opening your ears. So words, I love this, and this is something that Wally and Shirley wrote in their notes. And thank you again to Wally and Shirley for sharing this amazing insight with us. They've been married for many, many years, and they've got wonderful, wonderful pearls of wisdom for us tonight. And the one thing they've said here is that words are containers for feelings and emotions. And I really love that. So words are way more than just things that come out of our mouths. They're actually the containers for how we are feeling on the inside. It's more than just what you're saying. It's about your partner's feelings, about their ideas, their thoughts, their opinions. It's so much deeper than just what comes out of our mouths. So I'm going to pass over to Sean, and he's going to talk about what are feelings.
So I think, firstly, I think what we are all good at is talking. I think every single one of us talk, and I think that's why tonight's such an important part of communication, is because we generally, even if you take like a tense situation or a high emotion situation, the first thing that's coming to mind is like, what am I going to say to my partner? And that's really what's going around in our minds, instead of sitting and trying to understand our partner. And the one thing I keep saying over and over again, and which we're going to continue to repeat, is that statement of you before me. So even in our listening, my job as a listener is to put my wife before me and understand her on every level before I get to have my turn to then communicate. So that's the thing around feelings is, can we understand our partner's feelings as opposed to trying to just constantly express how we're feeling about something. So before we can become effective listeners, we have to understand the importance of feelings within our marriage. So what is a feeling? It's a spontaneous inner reaction to a person, a place, a situation, which one is experiencing or thinking about. So someone says something, someone does something, and it triggers this emotion inside of us. And it can just be a general conversation about something, and all of a sudden there might be feelings of anger, frustration that rise up inside of us.
So there are two things about feelings that we wanted to say. And the first one is that feelings are signals. They're basically your body, your inner person saying something's happening here. I'm feeling agitated. I'm angry. I'm not enjoying what this person's saying. I am enjoying this experience. It's your body's way of telling you this is what's going on. So the thing about feelings, though, is that we have the choice to do something with those feelings. So we get them involuntarily. It's from within us. They just come. It's our body's expression of what's happening to us at the moment. But we then have the choice to say, what am I going to do with this feeling? And am I going to take this feeling of anger and do something morally correct or morally incorrect with it? Am I going to take this feeling of frustration and explode out of my sockets and start freaking out? Or am I going to take this frustration and allow myself to inwardly work through it and figure out what I need to change about myself, or what is the change that needs to happen in the situation that I'm experiencing at the moment? And that is something that's so powerful, that we have the choice to respond to how things are going on inside of us. And we go back to that week that we did, I think it was the one before the last one, with the 12 habits that lead to marriage breakdown, where we talked about how our feelings are not meant to be the primary advisor for decision making. And this is very much it, that yes, we have feelings and they're very legitimate and they are given to us for reasons, but how are we going to outwork those feelings? What are we going to do with them? And that brings me to the second point, which is that feelings actually come from God. He created them, He gave them to us, they're there for a reason. And we need to respond to them rather than to react to them, which isn't always possible. And we don't always get right, and I definitely don't always get that right. So often we can allow our feelings to overwhelm us, and there's just this bottling up of emotions, and out comes all this very unnice, well, not very nice stuff from inside, and it can often cause conflict in our marriage. But if we as individuals in our relationship can learn how to start to filter through our feelings, how to gain control of them, how to use them the way that God intended, which is to show us that there's something about this situation that isn't right, or it is right, it feels good, and we can start to purposefully react and outwork them.
So what's also important is the way we communicate our feelings. So that is so important. There's two layers to that. One, the way we communicate it, and two, the way we hear our partner communicating a message. So they might mess it up, and Linz was talking about reacting and responding. So they might be reacting to a feeling, and it might be messy at the time, but I can respond in a really gentle way that then goes back to her and really helps her or understand that feeling. Instead of her reacting and then me also reacting, I can then choose in that moment to say, okay, wait, let me not react to how she's reacting. Let me rather respond and ask the right questions to help her through that emotion, or vice versa.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just cheating and pushing in here. The one thing I wanted to say there is that we have to be very careful when we are expressing feelings, that they come out as feelings and not as judgments. It's so easy to say, you are XYZ. but actually it's my opinion and my feeling about the action that the other person has done to me. And so it's always wise when we are being, and I'm now going off the topic of listening onto speaking, but when we do speak, that we are saying, I feel this, not you are. It really helps to avoid conflict. Sorry.
It's okay. She wants to talk more than listen tonight. So, an example of what Lindsay just spoke about now. So, like, let's take disciplining our kids as an example. So, she could say, "You are really harsh with the kids," which is very judgmental and a harsh way of saying it. Or she could come from the perspective of, "I actually feel really anxious and scared when you discipline the kids." So it's a different way. It's not saying you are something, but it's saying this is how I feel when you behave in that certain way. And then I'm able to respond to that emotion as opposed to react to her saying, accusing me or judging me for something. So here's a couple facts about feelings. So firstly, feelings are neither right or wrong, but they are signals. So if you feel angered or something, it doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but it's definitely a signal for something that's going down deep down inside. So when your wife or your husband is speaking to you and you see some sort of emotion happening inside of them, it's not right or wrong, but there is something deeper that's going down inside, and that's what I want to hear as the listener. What is that thing deep down inside that's going on? And secondly, feelings come before behavior or action. So firstly, I feel angry, and then I either react badly or positively in an angered situation. So again, someone has felt something when you're listening to them before, that anger or frustration. They've been feeling that stuff before they've actually reacted to it. And then feelings need to be acknowledged and validated and not brushed aside. So that's
so important.
It is very important. I think, if I might speak for the guys, I think we can do that quite often, where there's this emotion that we've seen over and over happening again, and it's easy to brush it aside and just say, oh, they're just overreacting, okay, or not again, they're doing that again, and we just brush it aside and we look past that and we just try to find a solution to whatever that emotion is. But really, I think the art of listening and the art of communicating is really seeing that emotion and trying to understand why that person is feeling that, and really not trying to push it aside or poo-pooing it. People who feel listened to have less of a need to act on their sore feelings. So if I'm continually brushing that thing aside or not listening to her, eventually Lindsay's going to want to react on that because she feels like she's not being heard. She feels like she's not being understood by me. So as a listener, it's so key that I try to understand what she's saying, because when she feels understood, there's way less of an opportunity or need for her to want to react to me. And then fifthly, people feel genuine relief when someone understands how they feel. And I'm sure any of you have felt that when you've spoken to someone or someone's a really good listener. You might know some of those people in your life, and those are generally the people you'll confide in most of the time. But when you feel like someone understands you, it takes the weight off. There's a relief over you, and we want to be that to our spouse or partner. And we don't want our spouse going to someone else or needing someone else to feel that relief. We can offer that in the context of our marriage. The essence of listening is the ability to recognize, acknowledge what someone else is feeling, that
feeling is valid for them.
Thank you. That the feeling is valid from them. For them. We don't have to agree with what they're feeling or how they've responded to something, but it is where they're at and it is what they're feeling. And we got to validate that and we got to understand that.
Yeah, I think what we're just trying to say is that we want to acknowledge that the person is feeling that. It doesn't matter if you agree or disagree. You might be thinking, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that you're having an awful down because of this silly thing. But our aim is to say, I hear you, I see you, I acknowledge that you are feeling that way about it. Just so that the person feels noticed and seen.
Yeah. And then I think what's important to understand is that we all have different responses to different things. And we got to accept that we have differences in that. So I can't understand why Lindsay has certain responses, and it's very hard for her to understand why I have certain responses. But the more we listen, the more we'll be able to understand why someone is like that. And most of the time it is very valid from their perspective or where they're at. And then we spoke about most people like to listen, talk more than to listen. But really that can have disastrous effects, and if I'm constantly on a butt and talk and I'm not listening, that causes massive conflict in our marriage.
I think what we underestimate is that listening actually is really hard work. We think that it's merely just, opening our ears and sitting there and taking in what somebody's saying. But if you're going to listen effectively, it requires patience, it requires biting your tongue, it requires actually trying to understand what the person's saying to you, digging deeper into just the mere words that they are saying. It is difficult, it is hard work, it's something we have to practice on, something we have to get better at. So we mustn't underestimate that this area of our marriage does require time and effort. So there's 5 types of listeners that we want to share with you. And maybe you can identify yourself. Try not to identify your spouse. We all know it's very easy to identify our spouse just like that. Oh, that's you, that's you. I could tell you which one's Sean, and he could tell you which one is me. But we're not going to do that tonight. We're going to try and identify which one is ourselves. And it just helps you to understand a bit more about who you are as a listener and why maybe it's not the best way to be listening when you are chatting. So what type of listener are you? The first one is the bored listener. That basically says everything for itself. This is the person that's heard it all before. They're like, oh, here you go again. You're going on and on and on. Maybe it's a husband who's complaining about his job and he's come home again for the 5th night in a row and he's whining about his job again. And basically you just shut down. Your ears are there, but your mind's not there. Your heart's not there. You're just irritated. So this is the bored listener. Your brain basically goes into neutral. And this kind of listener generally doesn't give the partner the support and the emotional support that they're actually needing. They're sharing something, might be over and over again, because it really means something deep to them. So they're looking for encouragement, but you're so bored, you don't have time to give it. The second one is the selective listener. And this, I haven't seen this necessarily in Sean. I'm not sure this is exactly his one, but I've seen this so often before. And this is the listener who picks off bits and pieces of the conversation. Often this kind of listener will be the person who's got the TV on in the background, and they're actually listening to the TV, and there's just wah, wah, wah going on in the ear next door to them. And then the minute they hear one word that perks up their interest, all of a sudden they're back in the conversation, and then they'll often make comments or try and make a decision based on this little tiny bit of information that they actually listened to. And an example would be a husband or a wife watching TV while their spouse is talking, and the minute they hear something about financial spending, oh, yes, I heard spending, I heard money, let me listen to that. And then they totally blow off what the wife or the husband said because they didn't listen to the context of the conversation. I think we all can be a bit like this, especially when we've got kids running around in our homes and there's lots of noise and distraction going on. We can often just pick up bits and pieces of what is being communicated and not actively take time to hear it all. And in last time's session, we talked about how with big, important things, it's so good to make appointments. It sounds so terrible, but to make an appointment to discuss this big thing, because then there are no distractions and you can actually focus in. So number 3 is the defensive listener. So this is me. I'll be honest. I tend to be a defensive listener. The minute Sean starts bringing something, and he may not even be talking about me, it may actually be something that's actually part of who he is inside, I start to think about how I'm not like that, or why I'm the one who's actually being dealt with incorrectly here. And this is the person who twists everything that's said around and makes it into a personal attack. And you can often find that as the other person in the relationship, you tend to stop talking, because every time you say something, it becomes a big conflict, it becomes a big drama, and that person's having a heart failure because they thought that you said that they were fat, but actually you weren't saying that she was fat. All those kind of things. It's a silly example, but that to show that the breakdown of that communication happens. And when we are a defensive listener, we tend to block up the other person, the speaker. We block up our spouses, and then we wonder why they don't listen and share their emotions with us anymore. It's so important not to be like that. And I've tried really hard to work on that area. Communication is still something that Sean and I are working on. We don't feel like we're gurus in this area yet. Maybe we'll get there, maybe we won't. But it's so important to not take things personally when your spouse is talking to you. Number 4, the interrupting listener. We all know somebody like this. This is generally the person who thinks they know everything. So not only will they just be interrupting, but then they love to tell you the story about, oh yes, that happened to me once, and this is what I did, and this is how I made it better. And generally, the interrupting listener is spending so much time thinking about what they're going to say next that they're actually not taking in a single word that's going in their ear. These are also the kinds of people that want to fix everything. You come as a spouse and you're sharing your deep, dark, intimate spaces of your life, and your spouse just wants to fix it all, tell you just suck it up, this is all you need to do, ABC, and it just causes major drama and breakdown in communication. So important not to interrupt. Lines like, oh, that reminds me of the time when. Those are the kind of things we don't say when we're having deep, effective communication as couples. And then the last one, so as you can see, these are all bad listeners. The last one is the insensitive listener. I can also be a bit insensitive, actually. I'm too. It's really bad. The insensitive listener is one who cannot catch the feeling or emotion behind the words. So they're just seeing the words, and they're not realizing that words are a container for the deep feelings that are going on behind that. And they tend to be just like it's water off a duck's back. Your words have come, they've gone in one ear and out the other. There's no deep connection. There's no actual connection to your feeling and what's going on with you. And this can often be very difficult for the spouse that's on the receiving end. They never feel heard. They never feel understood. They feel like sharing is actually becoming a waste of time. I love this line that Wally and Shirley shared, and they said, let's not be guilty of only reading the label and presuming we know the contents. And that's what an insensitive listener does. They've heard the label, they've read the label, they've got the gist of it, but they've decided they know what's going on, but they haven't actually dug deeper and found out really what's happening inside the person.
Wonderful. I'm none of those, though, babes.
No, perfect.
Perfect, man. No, kidding. And so that basically, so we've seen now sort of 5 bad examples of listening and how we can sometimes get it wrong. And it's very easy to look at those and point and know which one is you, which means it's actually quite easy to then solve that problem or work on fixing that problem. As long as you own up to it and as long as you say, I actually want to change this thing inside of me. And so the next part of it is we want to ask the question, how do you become a better listener? So we're going to go through a couple steps. So firstly is maintain, this is my favorite part, good eye contact. So that's just staring at each other, looking in each other's eyes. The eyes are the windows to our souls. And this is not being a good listener. So yeah, boom, boom, TV on, listening there, and what's happening there, the dog's barking, close that door, window. So being a good listener is maintaining eye contact. Get rid of the distractions. Yeah. If your TV's on in the background and it's distracting you, switch it off. If your phone is beeping or buzzing, put it on silent without any buzzing. Close the laptop, close and put away all those little distractions that are going to stop you from maintaining eye contact within the context of that conversation.
Sorry. And with this as well, it's so important to maintain that actual eye contact, looking at each other, because body language is so important in communication. If you're so busy looking at your phone or looking out the window, you can miss really important cues about what's coming across from your spouse.
And then the next big one is to resist temptation. So there's a whole bunch of temptations, and they come from the first 5 bad ones, and that is to make them feel better or cheer them up. Yes. So don't stop them or don't try to fix it. We're listening and we're trying to understand. So you don't have to cheer them up and you don't have to make them feel better. Yeah. And don't sit there and constantly think about what advice. Resist that temptation to think about giving your spouse advice for what they are feeling or why you feel they shouldn't be feeling the way they are. Spend all that time maintaining eye contact and trying to understand why and what it is they are feeling. And then the third thing is to be attentive. Thank you. Yeah, attentive. How's that, for a few minutes as though nothing else matters in the world. And that just takes you really wanting to, you can't pretend that. I can't pretend to be that. I really need to say in my heart, actually, Flip, I want to pay attention to what she's having to say. And I think that's why it's so important what we said last week, where it's making a date for these important discussions. Because if we're making a date or we're setting a time, I can then say, you know what, for that time when we're meeting, it is serious and I'm going to pay attention. It's going to be the most important thing in my life at that particular time. Yeah, and making comments such like while your wife is speaking or husband speaking, like, I don't quite understand what you're saying there. I don't quite understand what you're feeling. Do you mind explaining a little bit more? So that's being attentive. That's like, I'm hearing what you're saying. I want to know more. And we're speaking about that topic. We're not veering off. We are tackling the topic at hand. Fourth, we're going to stop all internal conversations and working out answers. Thinking something similar that has happened to you, working on defense arguments. Again, that goes back to that. I always have a story about everything that someone's gone through. Let's stop thinking about ourselves. Let's stop thinking about what's happened in my life. Let's stop thinking about my response. All I'm thinking about is what's going on in my spouse's life at this particular point. And then ask yourself, this is so key, and I think this is key in communication across the board with our kids, everyone, is how would I feel if that happened to me? So put yourself in their shoes, and how would you feel in that? So why would you do that? And yes, you might feel differently as we are trying to understand the person's position.
I think too on that as well is this is such an era of respect for each other. So you're basically saying, I respect you enough to take the time to listen carefully, to not judge you, to not think about how to fix your problem, to not be thinking, what is the solution? I'm putting aside time because I respect you and I want to hear who you are. I want to know who you are deep down on the insides. Sometimes that can be a little bit scary for people. Like, to get deep down and actually share feelings is a very vulnerable place to be. And we want our spouses to know that this is a safe place. You can come and share your feelings with me, and I respect you enough to take the time to listen and to actively try and understand. You're not going to be judged. You're not going to have me throwing my toys out of the cot. Yeah. I am here so that you can start to dig into yourself and find out more who you are. So just going back onto those 5 things. So just quickly, maintain good eye contact. Resist the temptation to cheer the person up or make it better or come up with some advice that you've been desperate to tell them for the last 10 years. Be attentive. Stop all internal conversations. So stop thinking about the rubbish that was supposed to be taken out. The rubbish is a good topic on this course, eh? The rubbish that was supposed to be taken out on Monday. And then also ask yourself, if this was happening to me, how would I be feeling about it? Be empathetic. Empathize with your spouse. So we're going to move on to what effective communication looks like. And very scaringly enough, we are going to show you a demonstration. And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, that we have only recently learned this art of communication. So we are still practicing. So we're on this journey. We're not fancy psychologists. And so we're going to attempt to show you what that looks like so that you can practice this yourselves. Yes.
So with this as well is like, because I'm terrible at communication. That's like my worst thing ever. Thank you, Misha, by the way, for doing this with us. But the first time you do this, it's so awkward. Honestly, well, for me it is. Maybe it might not be for you, but for me it was incredibly awkward. But it was such a freeing thing to just have a structure to communication without these fireworks going on. You said, this said, and these arguments going back and forward. I found this way so helpful for firstly Lindsay understanding me and my position, and for me being able to communicate exactly how I'm feeling, and vice versa for Lindsay.
And this technique of talking and having conversation together is not just something that you can use to discuss a problem that may have arisen in your marriage. It's not just to discuss maybe a decision that needs to be made. You can also use this technique to get to know each other, or to explore maybe some feelings or behaviors that either of you individually have been expressing or feeling. So it's a way of becoming more vulnerable and getting deeper into knowing who the inside parts of us actually are. It can be so freeing for you as the person who might be talking, and as well as the listener, to have the opportunity and the privilege of being able to share in who you are on the inside. So I just wanted to reiterate that last time when we spoke about communication, we said big topics should be had like meetings set for them. So what we're going to do now is basically what one of those meetings would look like. So try not to have a big discussion like while you're cooking the supper and the kids are running around. Try and leave those for quiet times where you can do those 5 steps of being attentive, etc. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to sit facing each other. Try not to laugh. Because I must say, the first time we did it, I did want to have a bit of a giggle because it felt a little bit strange. But you're going to sit face to face so that you can look at each other's eyes and that there can be some form of communication and connection. Remembering that you're going to tackle only one topic. So today is not the day to dig out the 15 years of irritation and pain that you've experienced thanks to whatever it is that your spouse has been doing.
It's been that bad.
Today is the day we're going to take one topic and we're going to hash out that one topic. So this is how it goes. The first person is going to do the talking. Now, husbands, I'd like to suggest that wives should talk first, but maybe that won't be the best idea. You can decide amongst yourself who gets to talk first. The first person that talks is going to spend as long as they need to discussing the topic and discussing their feelings around it. Can you think of an example?
Should we do the kid one that we said? So it's a fictitious example.
So just a made-up example is the one that we spoke about earlier, where maybe the one spouse has got an issue with the way the other spouse is disciplining the children. So I'm going to be the spouse who has the issue, and I'm not happy with the way Sean is disciplining our children, which is not true before you go telling the whole world that I have this problem. I don't. And so it's going to be my turn, and I'm going to get to speak first to tell Sean exactly how I'm feeling about it. So I will start talking, and I'm going to tell him, Sean, I really feel nervous when you are disciplining the children. I don't really understand why, but I just have this anxiety that comes up. I get a little bit scared and tense, and I want to go and just rescue the child and bring them away from you during that time. And then typically what will happen here is if there seems to be some kind of break in the communication, Sean can say something like,
Sorry, I'm not understanding what you said about you saying you feel both anxious and scared at the same time. Can you explain a little bit more what you mean by that?
So basically the person that's listening is going to, the only stuff that's going to come out of their mouth is questions or leading comments that are going to draw out more information from their spouse. So I would reply with something like, well, I think I'm feeling anxious and scared because of the way you shout and raise your voice.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you are feeling anxious and scared when I raise my voice in disciplining the kids.
Exactly. No.
Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yes, there is. So basically you can see, so Sean has now repeated to me what I've said. So this is the one way that we can have this communication. I share what I'm thinking. If Sean doesn't understand, he asks for more information. When he thinks he does understand, he then repeats back to me what I've said. So I've said I feel anxious and scared when he disciplines the children, and I think it's because he speaks really loud and shouts. So he says it back to me, and immediately I feel heard. Yes, you've heard me. He might have repeated, say something completely wrong,
what I hear you saying is you think, yeah, I'm not a great husband, and you don't like the way I shout, and you think I can do way better at parenting our kids.
Then I have the opportunity to go back and say, no, actually, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I think that I am afraid of the loud voice and the shouting that you do with the children. So there's an opportunity for me to correct that maybe Sean has not heard me. He hasn't listened. He hasn't felt the emotion. And it's that little key, which sounds so strange and awkward to say, tell me more, is so important, because the spouse that's sharing immediately feels, okay, is safe. Okay, I can tell a bit more about this now. And you carry on along these lines of sharing short boosts of information, and the other spouse repeating what they've heard and asking if there's more information. And this goes on until the person who is doing the talking has nothing further to say.
So once I've summarized what you said, now I can respond to that and just saying something to the effect of, so yeah, or I've repeated and I've validated what you said. I can totally understand why you feel like that when I shout at the kids. So then say Lindsay's felt heard, I'm going to go into why I'm shouting at the kids. So when I grew up, firstly, I thank you for letting me know that you feel anxious about how you feel around the kids. When I grew up, we were 4 boys in the house. Not true, not in my family, but there were 4 boys in the house, and the only way you could be heard is if you shouted the loudest. And so I think partly I've been disciplining our kids like this because I've felt like I need to be heard and that no one is listening to me, and the only way for me to be heard is for me to raise my voice.
Okay, so basically the steps in the process are, I'm speaking now about the topic. This is what I'm saying. My spouse or Sean is going to repeat to me very often what he thinks that I've said. I get the opportunity to agree or disagree. Yes, he has heard me, or no, he hasn't. At the end of that, he's going to repeat to me in his own words what I've said the entire conversation. So this is the gist of what you've said to me, Lindsay, over the last 10, 15, 30, 40 minutes. And he reiterates what it is that he's heard. I then say, yes, that's exactly how I'm feeling. You've got it. What a relief. I've been heard. I've been understood. You see my feelings. You hear me. And then it turns over to Sean's turn. And he becomes the speaker and I become the listener. And he gets to share his side of things on that. Sorry, I missed a step. Before he gets to share, the empathy section comes in, and this is vital because this is the part that creates connection. And we did this little process with Misha and Peter, my cousin, on their couch, and this little piece of information was like the penny dropped for me, that it's the empathy that creates the connection. It's my husband saying, I get it. I see why you're feeling that way. I can understand why this is hurting you. I understand why you're anxious. I understand why you're scared. Because maybe I'm anxious and scared of the way he disciplines the kids because I had a father who shouted and did things to me when I was a child. Also not true. But that's opportunity, and you can start to see and get deep into each other's feelings around that topic. The minute I feel heard, the minute I feel that he actually understands me, there's this immediate connection between the two of us that happens. So instead of this being a shouting match of, stop screaming at the children, you are a bad father, you say things that you shouldn't say, and him shouting back at me and saying, you know, whatever he wants to say in the instant, that just causes major conflict. It separates us from each other. Absolutely nothing good comes from it. But by taking the time to really listen, to hear, to repeat, and to be empathetic about our spouse's feelings, this connection happens. I hope this is coming out right.
Yeah, feels right. Feels like I've been heard. But I think just to summarize, I think what we've been saying over the last while, so everything we do in the context of a marriage, we want to build towards each other and not build away from each other. So when we bring that into the listening, for me to build towards my wife is for me to understand my wife. It's for me to get, I remember, I think it was Misha and Peter said this a couple of years ago when they first did this whole process of communicating. It's my island and your island. So I need to get onto Lindsay's island, which has different trees, it has different birds, it has different animals that live on that island, and the laws in that island are very different to what's on my island on the other side. So I get onto her island and I try to understand what's on her island, and I emphasize and I empathize what's happening in her life, and vice versa. Why? Because we want to build towards each other, not away from each other.
Yes. And there's some really key lines that you can practice and learn to say to your spouse when they are sharing with you. And I just wanted to say one or two of them. And this is from Wally and Shirley's notes. And the kind of phrases you can use when you are the person listening are things like, you sound, and then you can insert the feeling. You sound anxious. Tell me more about that. And then you give your spouse the opportunity to share more. Another thing you can say is, it seems as though you are feeling, insert emotion, and maybe that emotion is overwhelmed. Is that true? Is that how you're feeling? And then your spouse has the opportunity to say, yes, you've got it. Or actually, no, you haven't. Or actually, I don't know what I'm feeling. Help me understand what it is. Another thing you can say is, it sounds like you are. And then insert emotion. Maybe it's discouraged, angry, upset, whatever you want to put in there. Another line is, I can understand why you feel. I love this line. For Sean to say to me, I can understand why you are feeling sad, or I can understand why you are feeling let down. That is it. I'll be happy for the next 2 days because he hears me, he sees me, he feels me. I feel seen and heard. It's an amazing line. And then another thing you could say is, I'm sorry that you feel X, Y, Z. I'm so sorry that you feel alone, that you feel like I've abandoned you. You're not necessarily just admitting that you're wrong, because maybe you aren't always wrong. You will have your turn to share your comments on it as well. But just merely by about saying, I see the feeling. Remember, the words are the container for the feelings, and feelings are not everything about us. Actions come from feelings. But being able to hear your spouse's feelings and dig deep into them helps us respond correctly, to have the right action to the feeling that comes from it. Gosh, I hope that makes sense.
And maybe just a quick little personal story. We haven't shared many of those tonight. No, but it's a positive personal story. And I think it was after week 1 of the whole lockdown. For me, I like to know where I'm going. I like to know my big goals. I like to know the big brushstrokes. I don't have to know the detail. And obviously with the lockdown, it had created quite a lot of anxiousness inside of me, because all of a sudden a lot of those solid things were no longer solid in my life. And I didn't know what I was feeling. I just knew I was anxious and something was not right with me. And instead of Lindsay just like responding, hey, what's wrong with you, or something like that, she sat me down. I was sitting on the bed, and she said, hey, Sean, what's going up? I can see something's not right. She asked me the question, and I was like, well, actually, I don't really know what's up. And anyways, she started using this process of asking me a whole bunch of questions about how I'm feeling, and ended up figuring out, actually, you know what it is? It's just, I don't have anything big in my life at the moment. I don't have anything I'm aiming towards. I can't see the big brushstrokes. And then being able to accept that and say, actually, that's okay for now. Everyone's in the same boat. We can get through this. But once I could see why I was feeling like that, so Lindsay was able to communicate with me and use a tool to help me out of a place where I was feeling anxious or didn't really understand what was going on inside of me.
So this technique for communication is a great way of helping your spouse through something. If your spouse has experienced a trauma, or something has happened at work, maybe a demotion, or they've lost their job, or you've both gone through something terrible with a child, this is a way that you can help each other get to see what's going on inside of yourself. Your spouse can help bring out those feelings, and it can help you as a spouse start to understand where your partner is and what they are feeling. It's a really I can't express enough how important this kind of communication is for connection, and the freedom that comes when we take the time to discuss something, no matter how big or small it is, with effort. Yeah.
So that's really communication, or listening, which was the topic tonight. Lindsay's got one last thing, and
Sorry.
then
Very, very important. The last thing I want to say is if you find that your conversation is going pear-shaped, so you've sat down, you've done all the things we've said, you've stared deeply into each other's eyes, you've got all those lines in the back of your head of, okay, I can understand why you feel that way, and hang on a sec, it's starting to explode, it's going south. Press pause. Just say to each other, this is not working out the way it should. There is no connection happening here. This is conflict. It's separating. We can't talk about this now. Let's press pause and come back to it. I can remember once before we knew this art of communication, Sean and I having quite a heated discussion about something, and I just realized this wasn't working and I needed to escape. And I said, we can't talk about this now. And I left the room and I went and spent some quiet time by myself in the lounge, feeling very sorry for myself at first. And I just started to pray and ask the Lord to help me. And in that quiet space on my own, I suddenly had a revelation of what it was I was missing that Sean was saying to me. And we were able to re-engage or restart the conversation and finish it well and come to a good ending from it. So don't feel afraid to press pause and say, actually, this is not working. We can't talk about this now. And another thing I wanted to say is don't go with a particularly sensitive, horrible subject to start with. Practice this technique. Start with something that maybe isn't hugely emotionally sensitive to the both of you. Practice the art of communicating this way before you go into something that is very volatile or sensitive. I'll stop talking now.
no, perfect. So if you do have any questions, you're welcome to post them. We will have a quick little look-see and see if there is anything while I summarize and just say what we're up to next week. So on Friday, we're going to be going over conflict management. So that will be quite a fun one. How do we deal with conflict? So when those heated discussions do happen, or there's a massive disagreement in opinions or thoughts or what we're going to do in life, how do we resolve those things? Because that is natural, and we do live on two different islands where we in essence have different worldviews and ideas, and we're trying to bring them together. So there is going to be conflict. And then next Wednesday we're going to be doing a sexuality. So we are going to do the broad brushstrokes on this one. We're not going to go too in depth, obviously, because we live on Facebook and there could be kids watching and all that sort of stuff. So we are going to be we're going to go more into sexuality and how we've been created as sexual beings as opposed to the actual under the sheets stuff.